Good morning to everybody, all participants, and thank you for attending this webinar. As you know, most of you participated already in our two previous webinars. We are finishing today the series on planetary health. So this is the third of a series of webinars dealing with planetary health that is organized by the EEAC network together with our colleagues from the CADS, so the Catalan Council for Sustainable Development. And the idea here is to provide and to stimulate a deeper understanding and discussion on the relevance of the current trends of planetary health and the need that all of us, different levels of work and governance, have to address and to take action at all of these levels. As you may remember, and just to link with the previous webinars, we started with the first webinar that was very exciting and interesting, touching the concept itself of planetary health from different perspectives, from human health to the One Health concept. And we were discussing policy coherence and entry points that could bring the concept of planetary health with several other global instruments, such as the Paris Agreement, the Agenda 2030, the Sendai Framework, and other like the New Urban Agenda. So during the second seminar, we were around the connections and nexus between food health and the connections between biodiversity loss, land use change, and other threats, serious threats to health, as well as on the relation between climate change and human health. Today, we are finishing and linking not only with what we did within the two previous seminars, but adding more practical approach, focusing on ongoing initiatives, very important initiatives that are working to help governments and other organizations to prevent future health risks related with ecosystem degradation, biodiversity loss, pollution, and climate change, among others. So we have here experts from different geographies and research institutions, university, and advisory councils that will share with us this morning on the different policy instruments and initiatives that are available or under perspective. So the program, as you saw already, will have two presentations that will center staged on two specific initiatives: the Helsinki Declaration that will be presented by our colleague Jaana Halonen, and the second one on the EU Green Deal that will be presented by Celine Charveriat. And we will have also a third contribution by Sabine Schlacke, our colleague from the German Advisory Council on Global Change, that will go more into the policy instruments available to prevent future health risks that are related with ecosystem degradation, biodiversity loss, and changes in land. But we have more than that. We have an extra. So for all those that were with us, so we will have a video contribution by the Planetary Health Alliance that will highlight what we discussed already during this series. So the São Paulo Declaration on Planetary Health was already mentioned, but we will have also a video stressing and calling us the attention for this important tool and the line of work for many of us. And we will finish with some words by our chair, Arnau, which is the chairman of our network. Myself, I am António Abreu, so I am the one that will try to moderate and lead this process, but I have behind me a wonderful team from starting from Natasha, as well as Fina, and all the colleagues of CADS that were behind us, as well as our Executive Secretary Michiel de Vries that was key and central for bringing us together today. So let's start, and I will give the floor to Jaana Halonen, that will talk us about the Helsinki Declaration, and just a brief word to say thank you to Jaana for being with us. Jaana Halonen is currently director of a research program, Safe and Health Promoting Environment at the Finnish Institute of Health and Welfare. She is a well-known expert on environmental health, holding a PhD in epidemiology, so very trendy these days. And between 2015 and 2019, she was senior researcher at the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health, as well as Stockholm University, and research fellow at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in 2014. So, Jaana, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Like presented, I'm Jaana Halonen, and I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this webinar and to give a presentation on the Helsinki Declaration. Let's see if it moves forward. So, as you have heard in this series of webinars, Planetary Health has few different definitions. One of them is by the Rockefeller Foundation and the Lancet Commission from 2015. Just as a brief reminder, this definition of planetary health is that there is an understanding that human health and human civilization depend on flourishing and balanced natural systems and the wise stewardships between those ecosystems. And despite there are some differences between the different definitions of planetary health, there is also one common goal. They can be seen as an evolving effort to combine the ongoing but somewhat unfinished agendas of human, environmental, and animal health with the Global 2030 Sustainability Agenda. So I was asked to present you the Helsinki Declaration, which may not be familiar to all of you, so a few words for the background. In 2019, THL and Finnish Environment Institute organized a conference called Europe That Protects, Safeguarding Our Planet, Safeguarding Our Health in Helsinki. And this conference was a side event of the Finland's presidency of the EU. In this conference, researchers, policymakers, and regulators came together to discuss how the planetary health approach could be implemented within Europe. The conference was infused with a strong sense of urgency for actions to support the health of humans and the health of our planet. And we need to reduce the climate change related disruptions for environment and human health, as well as the disruption of biodiversity, and we need to reduce pollution and chemicalization. As a result of this conference, the participants agreed upon a declaration that calls for urgent actions to support planetary health during the 2020s. This declaration is discussed also in the Lancet Planetary Health commentary paper that we wrote and was published last year. I will now go briefly through the 8 points of the declaration. H for human health means that we need to raise awareness about the strong interlinkages between human and environment's health. It is important that all governments and decision-making take into account both the health of humans and the health of the environment. And we hope that the consideration of human health also motivates the decision makers to make the decisions that are at the same time environmental friendly. This sort of win-win situations could also motivate towards behavioral changes, such as those related to dietary choices and physical activity in transportation at an individual level. In practice, wide communication, education, and counseling are needed to increase the critical mass of people who are conscious about these issues so that the change will come possible. E stands for equity and stresses that when policies are planned and decided upon, their effects on social and cultural fairness should be considered, assessed, and taken into account throughout the whole process. We should ask ourselves, how do our actions and behaviors affect others, also in the other side of the world? This relates, for example, for the purchase of goods and the change that their transportation and production requires. Indeed, a systemic approach creates a good opportunity to pay attention to the equity issues in all of its dimensions, including social, cultural, business, community, and gender-related issues. This sort of more distant sustainability issues that are more distant from your current day activities should be considered in procurement in all sectors and in all management levels. It has been shown that fairness empowers people to work toward common goals, whereas inequity hampers the economic growth. L for long-term goals means that strategic choices in all sectors should also aim for long-term action plans with predefined goals and priorities. Improved cooperation between public health, energy, transportation, agriculture sectors, and also with chemical and other industries are essential. Failure of knowledge transfer between these sectors is one of the major challenges in planetary health actions. And there is an urgent need for more interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary research to help ways how to do this. The new EU research agenda, Horizon Europe, offers a unique opportunity for a shift from traditional environmental health research towards a more interdisciplinary approach that can bring together humans and ecosystems health research. While more interdisciplinary research is needed, S for short-term actions calls for near-term actions that are based on the existing knowledge. We already know that reducing air pollution, chemical contamination, as well as ending smoking, for example, all lead to co-benefits for human and environmental health. It should be kept in mind that the health benefits from climate change mitigation actions could offset the costs, at least in the longer term. And thereby, the implementation also of the near-term actions that are aiming at these co-benefits should be fortified. I stands for interventions planned together with communities Such interventions can provide information for policymaking that is really relevant at the daily level. Co-creation of the pilots and interventions with the stakeholders is a way to increase the motivation and implementation of the actions. We often have research knowledge, but it is not implemented in the action level. These interventions could be part of the city planning, for example, including nature-based solutions and walkable and biker-friendly areas in cities, where actually 2/3 of the European people are currently living. N for nature highlights the importance of well-functioning and biodiverse natural systems. The epidemic of non-communicable diseases and environmental degradation could be stopped by some co-benefiting actions, such as stopping smoking. In the first webinar, Josep Anto already presented this example about smoking. We know that the health benefits from quitting smoking are really good, but the myriad of other types of effects that smoking and production of tobacco are and how they affect human life are not that clear. For example, growing tobacco requires large amounts of land, use of agrochemicals, and it may cause land degradation as well as biodiversity loss. The manufacture of tobacco also needs lots of energy, water, and other resources, and it produces large amounts of waste. This example indicates how the chain from a harmful endpoint, tobacco smoking, going backwards, reveals more harmful impacts in the chain. And that a health intervention could actually also be an environmental intervention. K for knowledge emphasizes the need of scientific knowledge and innovations as the basis of new actions. While the existing knowledge should include urgent and near-term actions, there is still need for new research knowledge from different areas. An EU project, Health and Environment Research Agenda, has identified some important environmental related research areas that need to be prioritized. These goals were also presented in the first webinar, but they can also be found behind this link on this slide. It is important that the produced knowledge is also usable for policymakers, and this requires more close collaboration between researchers and the policymakers, already at the planning phase of the research projects. Here, we researchers could be even more active to have the dialogue with the decision makers about their needs of information and knowledge. Like presented in the last week's webinar, the European Climate and Health Observatory is a joint initiative of the European Commission, the European Environmental Agency, and many other organizations. It was launched to improve the knowledge base for policymaking regarding the climate change and human health. And it also improves the knowledge transfer between researchers and policymakers. It provides easy access to a wide range of relevant publications, tools, and web pages and other resources that are needed for policymakers. And finally, I for impact-oriented actions calls for the evaluation and adjustment of the actions in real life world so that the successful actions can be upscaled. Importantly, we also need to be open-minded for adjustment and renewing those actions that are found to be ineffective. In high-level research, it is also important to think how the impacts can be measured. This is not always too straightforward. The Helsinki conference took place already 2 years ago, but a lot has happened since. So I want to mention just a few examples here. More health impacts of climate change have been observed even in Europe. You all remember this year's forest fires in Greece and the floods in Germany and Spain with sad consequences. This indicates that we are not ready for the ongoing changes in the environment. However, some progress has also been done. Last September, the WHO published new air quality guidelines that should be the backbone for policymakers to reduce air pollution. Also, at the same time, with the reduction of air pollution, there is often reduction of greenhouse gases. And these guidelines should be taken into account in all countries and all cities. The Lancet Countdown works to ensure that health is at the center in all policy making, and it wants the policymakers to understand that there is problems between climate change and human health. One partner of the European Climate and Health Observatory, the Lancet Countdown in Europe, was launched in September. And their webpage also includes a lot of information for policymakers. But in summary, the Helsinki Declaration calls for urgent global, regional, national, local, and individual level initiatives, transdisciplinary and multisectoral actions and measures. These can help in shifting from fragmented policymaking and actions towards a more systematic actions that will promote human health and also the health of the planet. The systems thinking will feed into conserving nature and biodiversity and halting climate change, and at the same time promoting human health. And that was all I wanted to say. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward for the questions and the following presentations.
Thank you very much, Jaana. Very exciting presentation, and maybe surely the best way to launch our discussion and thinking on the different entry points and approaches that are under this concept. I have 2 or 3 questions to you. They are all related, but I noticed that you stressed a little bit on the need of information and knowledge, which is a solid pillar for any strategy or action. So without information, and this makes a good link with the research and the need of information for all levels. My question is, what are the risks of, because this is good to identify gaps and needs, but also it brings us to some initiatives that may be too specialized, for sure, because we need detailed information in some fields that is not yet available. But what mechanisms and what supporting mechanisms do we need also to make sure that while promoting specialized research and having this information will be available. So how can we transfer? Because one thing is to identify the gap and promote research on that, but what are the mechanisms to bring back the results of the research that we are promoting? Because in many cases it's too specialized, and then it ends very far from the starting point. So the need of that information under code and language that can be used by not only policymakers, but also for the common citizens. So considering from the Helsinki Declarations, what are the conditions or the needs or the tools that we should implement in order to make sure that we will grab and have that information available, which is something that we really look forward?
Well, that is a tricky question. Of course, I think one thing is that the funders should require collaboration between the researchers and the end users of the information, so that the end users can say what is actually possible currently. Of course, there needs to be this basic research that goes much to the details, but then also this applied research together with the stakeholders and policymakers is important. And then if the funders require that this is there, I think that's one of the guidance options to make the research and the knowledge be more usable.
Okay, so that means that we need also to work with donors and programs that are promoting research in order to have awareness of the impacts of what they are promoting. Two other small questions. How would you respond to the comment that another strategy to enhance other strategies may not be the best way forward for the European Union? So bringing one strategy, well, the thinking from the planetary health to support another or a set of strategies that are already ongoing. How can we clarify or address these potential critics?
I'm not sure if I understood this correctly, but there are these different strategies and how they should be combined. Is that the...
Yes, that is the question. And if using a strategy to enhance and boost other strategies, if that may generate conflict or overlapping or let's say a non-clear understanding of the role of each strategy.
Yes, well, that is also somewhat cumbersome because there are different strategies from different sectors, and these should actually be brought together so that they can discuss and see the systemic influences that there are between different sectors and between these strategies. So just knowing about these strategies, the researchers could try to also include some points from the others. It might be that researchers are so focused on their own study fields that they are not looking around too far. And that's why the interdisciplinary research groups are needed and this type of research, so that the knowledge from the other sectors and about the other strategies are brought together. And then at least some parts of them could be solved then together. This is part of the systemic thinking and research, doing research in that way.
Thank you very much, Jaana. I think we set the ground for the next speaker. We for sure will try to continue this discussion and maybe collecting more questions. And even after the, the webinar, I recall that The webinars are being recorded and they will be available, so the discussion can continue offline, or we can generate other opportunities. So now we will see precisely how the EU Green Deal can be an opportunity for enhancing planetary health. So this is the best way to link with the previous talk. And now we have Céline Charveriat. She has a background in political sciences and international relations. Currently executive director of the Institute of European Environmental Policy and member of the European Commission's high-level expert on economic and social impacts and for innovation and research, as well as member of the Assembly of the Soil Health and Food Horizon Europe mission, and was, among other things, chair of the board of the Climate Action European Network until 2 years ago. Céline, you have the floor. Thank you.
Yes, now it's much better. Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction, Antonio. I'm super excited to be here talking at this webinar. So I represent IEP Sustainability Think Tank, and I have a big interest in this particular issue also because of my background. I used to work for many years at Oxfam, and part of my responsibilities included campaigning on public health, including public health systems strengthening and financing in the developing world, as well as intellectual property and access to medicines, which is obviously quite a topical issue right now when we're talking about vaccines. And in terms of what I will present today, on the health side, I will very much focus on mental health issues, because we've done a piece of research together with IS Global, quite well-known stakeholder in the field of public health. So my approach to planetary health in terms of the Green Deal, when I talk about health, will focus on mental health. So, and now I can't move my slides. So this is...
I will move the slides for you.
Thank you so much. So the first thing to say is that the evidence is quite overwhelming about the link between pollution and, in this case, mental health. As I said, there's also other evidence about other health issues, but here I'm focusing on mental health. And you can see on the slide, air pollution, chemical pollution, noise pollution, and the impact it's having on mental health. And obviously, there are also major impacts on ecosystems linked with those pollutions. So we are both affected. All that is living is affected by pollution. Next slide. So when we talk about the Green Deal, I've put on the left side all the areas of the Green Deal, and then on the right side, I listed all the obvious links that there are between the action within the Green Deal and the potential impacts and benefits and linkages with public health. And I think what's also interesting is that the Green Deal is obviously happening at a time when the European Commission, because of COVID, has an opportunity to have more power and has been given competences by member states to deal with public health. And for those who have been following those issues, this has not always been the case. And so we have now a new EU health program, a new strategy action plan, with the ability of the Commission to link more its activities on public health and those on the Green Deal. Apart from those policy areas, there's a major opportunity, which I think for the moment the EU Commission is not availing itself of, in terms of the narrative of the Green Deal. If we look at what preceded the Green Deal, the 7th Environmental Action Plan, the goal, and the next one, the 8th Environmental Action Plan, which is now under discussion, talks about living well within planetary boundaries. So it always made a link between human well-being and the environment. But at the moment, if you look at what is the prevailing narrative of the Green Deal, and I can fully understand it, it's for political reasons, the Green Deal is more presented as a growth strategy. And I think especially out of COVID, there's a huge opportunity to talk about restoring lives, restoring all that is living, ourselves including, because obviously within COVID, we have had a major blow to our well-being and our health. The second point I wanted to mention is also, and this has been mentioned by the previous speaker on systemic change, that there is a really big challenge for the European Commission and stakeholders in general to keep a helicopter view of the Green Deal, and therefore to really see the link between nature and well-being, because everyone is now diving into specific policy files. So one of the key elements would be, okay, how would we actually assess the progress of the European Green Deal when it gets to the interface between the Green Deal and public health? And Eurostat is busy preparing a first proposal for the indicator framework for the Green Deal. And let's see whether there is something there that allows us to see whether we are on our way or not for that systemic change or that change of paradigm that we are looking for. Next slide. If you look at the latest, I can't see the next slide. Yeah, thank you. And there's a delay. So in terms of the latest policy developments on the European Green Deal, I noted a few that I think are particularly relevant. The report from the Parliament on the 8th AP, so the 8th Environmental Action Plan, which is more or less a plan that allows you to put everything in one place and to check with member states how we are getting on with implementation. The report from the Parliament is asking for the Commission to take into account the concept of the well-being economy. And this follows the work under the Finnish presidency of the well-being economy. And I think this is highly welcome because it's a way to get through the political hurdles of the growth versus degrowth and to focus on the ends, right? Not the means. I mean, growth is a means. The end is actually well-being. The second element is innovation for sustainability with Horizon Europe missions, which have just been launched, and some of them are clearly identifying interlinkages, for instance, the cancer mission. The Zero Pollution Action Plan, which has a few specific elements within them that clearly make the link between public health and reducing pollution that goes into the environment, and within that, the Sustainable Chemical Strategy. The biodiversity, we will have a forthcoming Commission proposal for legally, well, we hope a legally binding EU nature restoration target, but for sure there will be at least a proposal on restoring, so not just stopping further loss of biodiversity, but restoring, which is a fundamental change of narrative and of action, which is clearly needed. And within that, there's also a discussion about how do you ensure that sufficient public funding in the EU budget, but we hope also in the budgets of member states goes to biodiversity. And last but not least, the recent Farm to Fork EP vote, where we can see that the European Parliament, did approve the idea of a reduction target for the use of chemicals, as well as looking at demand-side measures to reduce meat consumption, which is obviously a big public health issue. Then moving to some recommendations to go a bit further. So what we are recommending based on our research is that there is a need to develop further public health policies. And in the case of mental health, we need a mental health and well-being strategy, which doesn't exist at the moment. Then we need to make sure that also within the European Green Deal, public health considerations are taken into account. There are many ways in which you can restore biodiversity, but you also need to ensure, for instance, that humans can benefit from green spaces. Integrating resilience indicators within the semester or within other major strategies of the Commission to make sure that on the economic side, we are making that link between environment, public health, and economics. Also making sure that we will focus on those furthest behind so that they benefit the most from action plans on the reduction of pollution. And last but not least, making sure that we are closing the funding gap for, among other things, but certainly for the biodiversity strategy, which at the moment is still the poor parent within the Green Deal. Next slide. Then I wanted to quickly focus on an issue, and this is linked with preliminary work from the EEA about the concepts of just resilience. And on the left side, you will see a fairly classical representation of mental health and the link between between your environment and your mental health. So physical environment, the proximate contextual environment, and the distant contextual environment. And here we see very much links between what is going on with mass extinction, climate insecurity, and how it interlinks, and pollution, and how it interlinks with the mental health. And on the right side, you see the donut, which is also quite famous in the environmental field, about what is a safe and just space for humanity. And I do think it would be really interesting to think, okay, what is this just resilient space within that safe and just space for humanity, both for our own health and for the environment. Next slide. Then turning to COVID, and I will go quick there, but obviously we face a situation due to COVID, but this will not go away, of a severe aggravation of mental health issues within Europe. Next slide. We can also see here the fear, worry, and stress are more frequent and more severe after an emergency, and we see that there's an impact of COVID-19 on mental, neurological, and substance use services, and that is the result of a rapid assessment. Next slide. And then also we know that, unfortunately, this is there to stay for a while, because the severity of the shock means that in terms of mental health, this will unfortunately not go away, even though we might be fully vaccinated and have treatments. So this is something really to be taken into consideration from a policy point of view. Next slide. In terms of a just transition, and within this overall just resilience, it's also very important to realize, and there's clear research from the EEA, new research forthcoming, that not only are the poorest members of society more exposed to pollution, but also they have less access to green spaces. So these are really compounding their existing vulnerabilities, and really needs to be taken into account as we approach within the Green Deal the just transition. Next slide. The other element to think about is what I call the case for a green care economy. I mean, clearly the healthcare systems are a major contributor to GHG and pollution. In terms of GHG, we think it's roughly around 5% of GHG emissions. And obviously, if you look at just the use of single-use plastics within healthcare, you can see that it's a major challenge for healthcare systems to live within, to exist or to operate within planetary boundaries. We can also see here figures, both in terms of how much it costs, that we have all those mental health issues, and also the links between non-communicable diseases, including mental health, but obviously many others, and the environment. So not acting on the environment, protecting the environment, given the impact it's having on our health, is costing Europe a lot of money, to say the least. Next slide. On the other hand, when we look at, okay, how can we, try to put a figure to the benefits of protecting protected areas, global research that was done, comes with an estimate of 5.55 trillion globally in terms of mental health benefits alone. Next slide. And obviously, all of us during COVID-19 realized how good quality green spaces were needed more than ever. And I hope that this realization stays well beyond the end of the COVID crisis, because of all the benefits, long-term benefits it has for health, but also cohesion within society. Next slide. And that's my final one. I think we still, face a situation where during the recovery, we missed the boat a little bit about how we could have used the recovery plans, and they're still ongoing. But I think much more needs to be done to make sure that we are boosting public and private investment in nature-based solutions, making sure health and mental health are prioritized within recovery plans, and also that we get to fixing the fundamentals. I've already talked about biodiversity, I've talked about the well-being economy, but we could go much beyond there, because with our trade policies, we also need to make sure that we are not destroying the environment of other countries well beyond the EU because of the way we consume resources and the way we use our trade policies to get access to those cheap resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Céline, for your interesting talk, and very stimulating too, pointing out new ways of looking to ourselves and our planet. Just to share with you that we have a contribution by Mr. Josep Anto that links with both presentations from you and from Jaana. He mentions that ERA research agenda under Horizon 2020 is already developing a set of research goals for planetary health under an integrated approach, linking not only with this specific field, but also with other priorities. So this, in a certain way, comes not only with what Jaana said, but what you just mentioned. So I would like you to comment on this, but also if you could tell us what is your thinking on the need or not about the EU Green Deal, if it should itself, the EU Green Deal, underline health impacts in a more clear, let's say, and direct way, in order to obtain not only the attention or more attention from the research and policymakers, publics, but also from the having a broader public attention and interest and support. So how do you think, first, if it is important, and how can we ensure that the EU Green Deal, it's not restricted to the, let's say, more environmentally friendly thing, but having these integrated perspectives?
Sure. I mean, on the research side, this is obviously highly welcome. What I would like to add beyond, choosing the topics, and it's already been mentioned, is really getting to a genuine interdisciplinary approach. I mean, I was part of the assembly for the soil mission, and I could see how difficult it was to get to a truly interdisciplinary approach within that mission. The second point would be, for me, the speed, because the real difficulty we have is that we need to be testing solutions at scale as quickly as is humanly possible, because the clock is ticking on many of our planetary boundaries. So this is very much the work of EEAC, so the work of this high-level group that is advising DGRTD to talk about the how, the rapid feedback loops, the at-scale experimentation, and therefore what should be the stakeholders of this research, so that we don't have the time, and so we really need to think through the how as well as the what. Then in terms of the Green Deal, as I said, I think the European Commission is not using the link as much as it could and should, because in my view, this is critical for getting public support for the Green Deal. The word Green Deal makes it very external, to someone's life and to someone's well-being. So I think the more we can show that it's about saving ourselves, it's not about saving the planet. And all of us on this call already know this, but the public doesn't necessarily know. And also, I'm struck that still also many people think the environment is a luxury issue. But again, when you look at the research, who are the most affected people? It's the poorest members of society. So, acting on the environment is also a social justice issue. And instead we get stuck of only talking about the cost of the transition, how it's going to be really hard, how it's going to restrict our liberties, how it's going to restrict our consumption. And in my view, the message about the huge benefits for our health and well-being are not getting through. So I count on everyone on this call that is really involved within this research community and beyond to raise their voice, because their voice is really needed to change the terms of the debate.
Thank you. Fully agree with you. No question about that. I'm also from the environment sector, and especially working on designated sites like UNESCO biosphere reserves. And recently we found, or the public, that we are talking about not birds or plants, but 270 million people that lives within this designated area. So trying to make them as a living lab for a new model and the transition. And only under inclusive and integrated views and approaches and policies supported by information and combining all sectors, because we need to find, I think you agree with me, that we live in a complex world. So we need a governance that is able to deal with this complexity and acceleration that we live. And this will be the only difference from now to the future. It's that it will be even more complex and even more speedy. So maybe we need to change our mindsets first, and the best way to do it is to bring on board as much as people and different visions as we have. Thank you very much. We will move for the next speaker. So we have now Sabine Schlacke, our colleague that is currently co-chair of the German Advisory Council on Global Change. She's professor of public law, executive director of the Institute of Environmental Law and Planning, law at the University of Münster, and judge at the Constitutional Court of Bremen. She's also chair of the Scientific Advisory Board of the Academy of Spatial Research and Planning. She will bring us the result of work that WBGU did. That is a well-known line of work about rethinking land during the time that we live, the Anthropocene, from separation to integration. Sabine, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Antonio, for the very kind introduction. Let me formulate 3 theses at the beginning. Our way of life makes sick and destroys the planet. Secondly, healthy people exist only on a healthy planet. And thirdly, the WBGU is really convinced that we must initiate a civilizational turnaround for planetary health. Not only in this flagship report, but already in the flagship report called a social contract for sustainability, the WBGU, showed that we need a great transformation to overcome the to overcome climate change, for example. In this flagship report, which we published in 2011, we identified 3 fields of transformation. And one field beside the energy system and beside urbanization was the field of land use. And in 2020, we then pick up again this field of transformation, and we ask ourselves, how can we overcome our behavior of land use? Then, because our way of land use makes sick and destroys the planet. And I think that this flagship report contains many, many references to human health and the environment. The starting point for this flagship report was the description of a trilemma which we called the trilemma of land use. This trilemma, what we identified, gives us a systemic view of the current challenges of our management of land. This trilemma contains 3 aspects of land use. We are currently observing 3 major global crises: the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, and the food system crisis. And here we see the relation to the human health system. This is the starting point of our flagship report. Let me give you the main cause of the climate crisis. You know already, this is that are the use of fossil fuels, the way we deal with land today, and also the considerable sources of CO2 emissions. And you all know that we have to diminish our CO2 emissions, and we have at the end to stop it, and we have to decarbonize all systems of using CO2 or which emit CO2. But besides, we also have to take into consideration that humans are causing worldwide mass extinctions. That is the biodiversity crisis, which we all can, we attend this crisis and we produce this crisis. We have an extinction rate of 100 to 1,000 compared to pre-human times. We have a loss of invaluable ecosystem services, and we have the biggest drivers that are land use, over-exploitation, climate change, pollution, and invasive species. And the third crisis is the food system crisis. Our food system is not sustainable. And let me give you some data. There are still nearly 700 million people suffering from hunger. Another 1.3 billion people have no access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food. at least no regular access. And at the same time, 2 billion people worldwide are overweight. Furthermore, the way we produce food is massively detrimental to the environment, for example, as a result of pesticide use, greenhouse gas emissions, or the destruction of ecosystems. Although sufficient food is currently being produced, it's by no means accessible to everyone. It's often unhealthy and generates high environmental costs. So we produce food in not the right way, and we have overweight and we have hunger at the same time. And this trilemma is caused by our land use. You see in the image below on the left side how the different demands on the land overuse are side by side. They are exclusively using the land and they are competing for it. And I think this is the most important point to overcome all the three crises. The WBGU recommends, how it is already mentioned, to integrate uses or keeping land open by multiple goals in mind, so that we move from separation of land use to integration of land using modalities. Certainly, there are certain uses or functions that cannot be combined with other uses and functions, but greater integration of different uses and functions on the same land can create space for untouched nature elsewhere. And how can this transition, and these are now my main points, from competition to integration, how can this succeed? How can the trilemma be mitigated and managed? And there we have different proposals. We propose, first of all, a new concept. It is our concept of a multi-benefit strategy in the context of the integrated landscape approach. And landscape we understand in the sense of the global change council. Landscape we understand as an area that is characterized not by the states, but by geographical, natural, ecological, and historical characteristics and interactions. And integrative means using landscapes multifunctionally and with added values, ensuring participation and reciprocity of stakeholders, establishing a shared framework for monitoring and evaluation, and establishing an adaptive management. In other words, reacting to dynamics and non-linear processes. So this is our concept. And then we have developed 5 multiple benefit strategies. And I can only pick up 1 or 2 of this to describe them a little bit deeper. First of all, we developed an ecosystem restoration strategy. And it is for sure motivated by the need to create new CO2 sinks, since global CO2 emissions are falling much too slowly. So we propose that restoration can make land-based CO2 removal synergistic. We need more restoration, and it is also an advantage for the global change, the climate crisis, and an advantage at the same time for the biodiversity crisis. So what we are what we were thinking about and what we were developing were different tools and different management strategies to combine on the same land. Secondly, we propose to expand and upgrade protected area systems. This is at the same time a benefit for the climate, because protecting ecosystems avoids CO2 emissions, and moreover, it absorbs CO2, and at the same time, it protects biodiversity. So we propose to expand the protected area systems to 30% of the global land area. And thirdly, and this is also addressed to the European Union, we need a more diversified, ecologically intensive agriculture. What we do not need is an intensive agriculture system. We need at the same time to secure food, protect the climate, and enable landscape resilience with our agricultural system. And so at the end, we propose to transform the EU agricultural system from a more intensive use towards an ecological use of land. Diversifying farming system is the key concept of our proposal. The fourth strategy concerns dietary habits, especially in industrialized countries. And there we have also, as a concept, we used the EEAC Lancet Commission Planetary Health Diet, and because this has a high vegetable and low meat content, and we propose to make this as a strategy for public canteens, for example, for schools, for the whole public sector, and as a model also for the private sector. The fifth strategy identifies timber-based constructions as a multiple benefit strategy for a sustainable bioeconomy. So here we focused on bioeconomy, and in this context, it is important to bear in mind that biomass is not available in unlimited quantities, and that priority must be given to food supplies, the conservation of biodiversity, and natural carbon reservoirs. But the building sector is the most important sector in this field, and building should be done in the future times by wood, which comes from sustainable sources. So we created 5 strategies to produce win-win situations for our trilemma, to combat our trilemma of climate crisis, biodiversity crisis, and food system crisis. And besides, we not only described and identified 5 sectors, we also give and developed 5 strategies for the governance. There we again had the idea to go on from our flagship report of the Great Transformation. And for this reason, we firstly proposed to support change agents like NGOs that do the right thing, for example, which save these monkeys and which rebuild the rainforest in Brasilia. So we need individual and institutional change agents to make this transformative turnaround. But secondly, we need national political framework conditions, and that means that the main actors are states, and they should proactively ensure that negative impacts of the land-related actions are taken into account, and that positive contributions are rewarded. When I talk about states, I mean also the European Union. So thirdly, we focused on the European Union, and in this context, we already listened to it. The European Green Deal is very, very important, and also the common agricultural policy. And we have to transform, as I already mentioned, the common agricultural policy into a common ecosystem policy. So the common agricultural policy should be transformed towards ecosystem policies. This is now not already done by the current CAP. It should be done by the next CAP more intensively. And we have also to look at the international level, and we have to strengthen the international cooperation. We stated that, well, we have the three main conventions from the Rio conference. This is firstly the Convention on Climate Change, secondly the Convention on Biological Diversity, and thirdly the Convention to Combat Desertification. But what we can see and have to take into consideration that all these conventions concern land use, but they do not integrate or they do not develop instruments to integrate a system of ecological land use. So we have more or less working side by side, and we have to interconnect these three conventions. And last but not least, we see that not only the international conventions will give us the instrumental toolbox, we have to establish new cooperation alliances, and we developed three models of these alliances. First of all, regional alliances that aim for the cross-border implementation of integrated landscape approaches. Then supranational alliances, the model is the EU. That means that countries unite for jointly common goals and target for a sustainable land stewardship, and they agree on common values and regulations to achieve this aim. A third model could be a global conservation alliances that aim at conserving and restoring valuable ecosystems like the rain forest in Brasilia, and they also share common values, and they protect for another state, or they pay for the conserving, for example, the rainforest in Brasilia. They pay for it, they finance it, and Brasilia then can or will conserve this very, very relevant ecosystem. So these are three proposals for a new cooperation on the international level. That means that we need states who are willing to do this, beside other, for example, alliances like the European Union. I conclude my talk with the following 5 points. We will only be able to make our food system sustainable and also our climate system and biodiversity system if we overcome the competition of land use and transform it to an integrated management of land. We have to come away from destruction, and we have to come to conservation and restoration of terrestrial ecosystem. We have to use the integrated landscape approach as an orientation mark, and we have to enable and strengthen the assumption of responsibility along entire value chain, and we have to drive land transformation through effective global governance, improving and decisively implementing what is already known and venturing into new directions. Only if our approach to land changes fundamentally, climate protection and biodiversity protection and the food system can succeed. And let me end with this sentence. We have to change ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabine, and especially for being pragmatical, because the messages must be very clear. I fully follow and agree when we talk about protecting nature or assigning protected areas. The figure of 30%, maybe it's clear. So, and we need, it's not a question that we shall, or it's not just an intangible goal. It's the minimum that we need as for our planet to function in a proper way to support what our needs. We have here 1 or 2 questions that are really touching the central points on this. It's about the political challenge that especially within the agriculture policy and the way of Europe is being doing this. It's heavily subsidized, and the change that we need must start somewhere there, because otherwise we will not do it at home, let's say at the European level, as well as we are not promoting that in places that are still starting to change the land. Myself, I had an extensive experience on working on developing countries, doing environmental and management social plans and frameworks for investments, especially in the fields of agriculture and fisheries. And what I see is that we are extending the bad way of doing our business into places that are still untouched. And so I don't see, from where do you think we should start? Is there a discussion already ongoing about this change? And how do you foresee the way of changing the EU agriculture policy?
Yes, thank you, Antonio. As you already mentioned, the EU common agriculture policy is based on subsidies. Yes, so the most important instrument is to provide subsidies, still in a way that an intensive agriculture is will be the result of these subsidies. What I think what we need is a new regulation, as a regulation or a directive on agriculture and how to do agriculture. And we need a link between environmental standards like the nitrate directive a link to these environmental standards, which are more or less command and control directives. And we have to integrate this into our system of subsidies first. And we have to make a framework, regulation or directive for these command and control aspects. And we have to make more, and we have to propose and develop more command and control regulations. This is my point, because now we only see this sector as an economic sector and not as an ecological sector. This is still lacking, even if we have some cross compliance aspects and so on. We have a little bit ecological framework, but not on the whole cap.
Again, the need of changing our mindset, because we are under a vicious of observation angles. A final question, when talking about the several ways that we need to address and lines of work for changing the way and factors that impact the land use and the way of changing this, you mentioned a few, like agriculture diversification, ecosystem restoration, etc. So can we pin out a priority, or this should be a fully and integrated approach? The question is, can you identify first, let's say, first priority? Sorry for redundancy.
Yes, well, that's a very crucial question, I would say. So I would not say as a lawyer that I have special priorities. We have to do that all, and we have a great pressure to do this for the goals of to combat climate change, to combat biodiversity loss, and the food crisis. So I would say we have to do this at the same time, and for sure, this is not easy to do it at the same time. But as already mentioned, we have time pressure, we have to react quickly, and we have different scales where we have to react.
Thank you very much. This is becoming exciting, but it's also when the time is putting some pressure on us. We will move now for some messages to take home, a part of the connections that we will make among ourselves during the next times following these webinars. And this will be the moment to listen and to watch a video message that was sent us by Jeremy Piver, Senior Program Coordinator of Planetary Health Alliance. So it's about why we as advisory bodies and policymakers should be interested in planetary health.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeremy Pivor, and I'm the Senior Program Coordinator at the Planetary Health Alliance. Thank you to the EEAC Network for having me speak with you all today for the third webinar of your Planetary Health series. To begin the talk and provide context, I want to start with the definition of planetary health that we use at the Planetary Health Alliance. Planetary health is a solutions-oriented, transdisciplinary field and social movement focused on analyzing and addressing the impacts of human disruptions to Earth's natural systems on human health and all life on Earth. Following the Rockefeller Lancet report on planetary health, the Planetary Health Alliance was launched in 2016 to support the field and movement of planetary health. We are a global consortium of over 270 organizations from nearly 60 countries, including academic institutions, nonprofits, multilateral and government entities. We also recently launched an individual membership program and already have over 1,500 members. The Planetary Health Alliance's mission is to promote, mobilize, and lead an inclusive transdisciplinary field of planetary health and its diverse science, stories, solutions, and communities to achieve the Great Transition, which is a comprehensive shift in how human beings interact with each other and nature. To accomplish our mission, the PHA works to build and serve as a coordinating body for the field of planetary health through encouraging and empowering a diverse global planetary health community, advancing planetary health understanding, and facilitating the education and training of current and next generation planetary health practitioners. We developed the first planetary health textbook, education framework, and host a planetary health campus ambassador leadership program, among many other initiatives. We are also dedicated to mainstreaming planetary health among the private sector, policy, and the general public. An example of our work in the policy arena is our close collaboration with the United Nations Development Program, whose administrator, Achim Steiner, is on our advisory board. With UNDP, we are supporting the development of their HIV health and development strategy for 2022 to 2025, since they would like to make planetary health a core focus area. For the private sector, we are helping develop planetary health frameworks for businesses. With the World Business Council on Sustainable Development's Healthy People, Healthy Business initiative, we have helped develop a planetary health pillar to work with 19 large companies to operationalize planetary health throughout their businesses. And for the general public, we develop accessible communication materials. We foster an online community called Hilo for people to network and collaborate. We host annual meetings, including the most recent 2021 Planetary Health Annual Meeting, co-hosted with the University of Sao Paulo, where we had over 5,000 registrants from more than 120 countries. Next year, we will host our 5th annual meeting at Harvard with the theme, The Future Planetary Health, Knowledge to Action and Action to Change. It will be a hybrid event in person and online, and I invite all of you to please attend. Our final area of impact is to promote actionable steps that individuals and society can take to advocate for and achieve progress toward planetary health. And this is what our most recent initiative, the Sao Paulo Declaration on Planetary Health, was focused on. The Sao Paulo Declaration on Planetary Health was born out of an imperative for urgent action. This declaration was co-organized by the Planetary Health Alliance and the University of Sao Paulo, and it is the first document of its kind developed jointly and inclusively by the global planetary health community. The central premise of the declaration is that humans must make transformational shifts now in how we live in order to optimize the health and well-being of all people and the planet we depend on. The declaration was published in The Lancet in early October, and it includes concrete actions for 19 stakeholder groups that support a more just and regenerative post-pandemic world. It was developed out of the 2021 Planetary Health Annual Meeting, and in partnership with the United Nations Development Program, a global consultation was held, including over 300 people from more than 70 countries whose recommendations were included in the final text. I encourage you to go to our website to read and sign the declaration. You'll also find videos from our launch event featuring guests like Achim Steiner, Paul Pullman, Hindu Umaru Ibrahim, as well as case studies of planetary health actions in practice. Over 310 organizations from 50 countries representing more than 19 sectors endorse the declaration, and the numbers excitingly keep growing every day. What separates this declaration apart from other calls to action is that this does not come from a singular community, but comes from organizations and individuals across all of society, because the great transition, the deep, rapid structural changes required in how we live on Earth, will necessitate all of us to act to ensure everyone, everywhere can thrive. Our next steps as the Planetary Health Alliance is to convene these different stakeholder groups to brainstorm how to operationalize the actions outlined in the declaration. So I invite you to join the Planetary Health Alliance, and I look forward to future collaborations with this network. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. We are getting to the end of this webinar, and now it's the time to give the floor to our dear colleague and friend, Arnau Queralt. That is our chairman since 2015. He's quite known within the network and very active, and it is a great pleasure for me and for other colleagues to serve within the board that is led by Arnau. He's also the director of the CADS in Catalonia since 10 years ago, so it's a decade already. And he has a background on environmental sciences and was member of the Academic Council of the University Institute of European Studies and president of the College of Environmental Scientists of Catalonia. So Arnau, you have the floor for a final message, and surely for what can we do next and what we will do as a network within this field. Thanks, Arnau.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you for your really kind words. So I am also pleased to serve as chair of the network, with having you and the other colleagues in the board and in the network. So first of all, I would like to thank all participants, speakers, the attendees. I mean, the EEAC network took the decision to include planetary health in its working plan for 2021, with the idea that planetary health was important and it is still important. And we thought that it would be very important for our members to get an insight of what planetary health means, and also to get some key messages to be delivered to our governments and parliaments, because as you know, the network, the members of the network advise both regional and national government and parliament. So now it's very difficult to make a summary to highlight the most important messages coming from every single presentation. But I took note of some of the ideas and some of the messages that we are going to submit to our members. I mean, we have members of all our councils here in the attending the sessions, but we are going to prepare a more detailed document. And the point is that I go back to July 2015, when the Rockefeller Foundation at the Commission on Planetary Health launched the report Safeguarding Human Health in the Anthropocene Epoch. I'm sure that you know the report, you have read it, but the main point which needs to be said, and it has been said during these 3 webinars, but needs to be said again, is that there is a growing body of evidence showing that the health of humanity, or health, and the health of future generations is intrinsically linked to the health of the environment. This is important because this means that health needs to be centered into all policies, and this means also that, linked to this, environmental and climate policies can also be the center, or should be the center, of all public policies, because of the importance of climate and environmental and food policies to ensure the health of the population. And it's another key message that we need to say is that humanity threatens. I mean, not only destabilize the Earth life, key life support systems, but the degradation of natural systems threatens to reverse the health gains seen over the last century. And this is, for me, a very powerful message to be transmitted, to be delivered to our government and parliament. And I take note of some messages coming from the Sao Paulo Declaration on Planetary Health that was launched on October the 6th. I think that they are crystal clear and that they can help us to put clear messages on the table of our government and parliament. Again, the point is, as I mentioned before, that disruptions and degradations of our natural systems are a clear and urgent threat, not only to the web of life, but also to humanity itself. That this is a very powerful message that needs to be understood. Second, that the scale of our own environmental impacts is threatening not only obviously the environment, but our nutrition, the mental health of our population. It's contributing to the increase in the exposure to infectious diseases and non-communicable diseases. And that these impacts are also driving population displacement and conflict. These are also very powerful messages. And the third is that, according to the Sao Paulo Declaration, but also according to what has been said during these 3 webinars, on our current trajectory, we can no longer safeguard human health and well-being. As I said before, in these 3 webinars, speakers have touched upon these main elements, but I want to make sure that we include it in these final messages. The point is that for those people working on sustainable development as our councils, this is not new. We have, there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of warnings coming from science, civil society, from our councils on these issues. However, and for me this is very important, is I think that planetary health, this very interdisciplinary approach, is consistent in a very powerful alliance between 2 very important stakeholders: health experts and organization, and environmental experts and organizations. So these are a very powerful alliance between the environmental, let's say, climatic community and the health community. And by showing the links between environmental degradation and human health, thanks to this alliance between actors and visions, I think we are putting the health of our planet and its impacts on the agenda, on the health agenda or the health policies, or in the agenda of our policymakers, stakeholders, and the whole society. And it is what, if you ask me, what are we going to say to our councils? The summary that we are going to deliver to our councils, besides the main, this concern about the situation, I think that we could deliver, we can say then that, told them that, first of all, the goal of ensuring good health to current and future generations requires taking care of the health of the planet. That this requires transformative actions in all fields. This is by putting health in the center of all policies, we can accelerate some actions contributing to the improvement of the environment and climate. We are going to tell them that linking health and equity into, or integrating health and equity into all policies affecting climate and environment will protect people's health, will maximize returns on investments, and will contribute to build public support for the urgently needed climate actions. I think that, and this is also a message coming from a letter that was signed by hundreds of health professionals and organizations some days ago. We are going to tell them that cleaner air and water, healthier and more secure food supplies, a resilient low carbon health sector, and a greener transportation and community design are all beneficial to people here and now. And then we are going to say then that we are sure that health cost savings will offset the cost of taking these actions in the field of the environment, climate, etc. And finally, what we are going to say is that if they need to advise, they are planning to advise their governments and parliaments, they need to transmit the idea that these governments should design a public policy 2.0 based on planetary health with an interdisciplinary approach, including all actors or all departments, all ministries, in order to make sure that everyone put the health in the center of their actions and in their thoughts. And this is, by doing so, we are sure that many things should be moved or transformed. Antonio, this would be my main messages from what we have learned during these days. I give you again the floor in order to close the session. Thank you very much, and keep moving.
Thank you, Arnau. Yes, this is the moment to thank everybody. Of course, these webinars provide us with more thinking, with more information, with more engagement and compromise. So there's no excuse. Every day we know more, we are more aware, we are informed not only about the threats, about the scenarios, but also on the ways of moving. And it's not just a question of awareness and sensitization, but this is time for action. One key word that I listened during all webinars is that we are reactive, we have a delay, we need to move into action as soon as possible. So we have hints, we have information, we know about gaps, but there is a space for working. And this is our role. So as facilitators, as a network that advises government and advises the European Commission, that brings together science, policymakers, civil society representatives, I think we have here a line of work that we should not forget and we should not ignore as a way of boosting and leveraging what we already did in the last years. So calling the attention for an integrated and inclusive view of sustainable development, that it's not just about environment as a foreign body of ourselves, but something that should and must combine nature as a pillar for any model of socioeconomic development. Thank you for being here, especially the participants. A special word for all the team that was able to set up this, and in particular the CADS, Michiel, Natasha, Fina, and all colleagues that behind the scene were working during months to set up this. A particular word for Jaana, Celine, Sabine, and Arnau for inspiring us with their work, for sharing their ideas, their facts, and their suggestions to moving forward. It was a great pleasure. So see you soon, and let's keep in touch, and especially let's do something. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant day.